Great, good morning and welcome everybody here today. May I open your Bibles to the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 10. So we had looked at this the last two times we were together, and I'd like to look at another aspect of this in verse 7. And I think what we'll do is just read here from verse 1 to verse 7. All right, so we're reading here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 1. And Paul is writing, he says, "Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with many of them God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted. And do not become idolaters, as some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play." So the two times ago, we had talked about tempting Christ in the wilderness. That comes from verse 9. That was about grumbling about the manna, and the manna was the type of Christ. And so in grumbling about that, they were, in effect, grumbling against the sufficiency of Christ. And then the last time we talked about the rock that followed them. That comes from verse 4. They drank of the spiritual rock that followed them. And because that rock was also a representation of Christ, that's why it was such a serious mistake and a serious offense for Moses to strike that rock. He was, in the symbolism there, he was striking Christ. So today we're going to look at another warning, this time against idolatry, and that's taken from verse 7. And the last part of verse 7 says, "As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." It says, "Do not become idolaters as some of them," because it's written. And it says, "The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." So that is a quote there from the book of Exodus, chapter 32. And that's what I'd like to spend the time on here. If you want to open your Bibles to Exodus chapter 32. And you may already recognize where this is coming from, where the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And that is in the incident of the golden calf. So as you will recall, the Israelites had left Egypt. They had gone across the Red Sea, where the Egyptian army was destroyed behind them. And then they came to Mount Sinai, and it was there that Moses went up into the mountain. And while he was up there is where this account takes place. So he was up there for a while. He was up there for, I think, 40 days. And while he was up there, the people didn't know where he was. And all right, so we're going to read here the entire chapter. It's 35 verses long. And let's just think about, as we're reading, what's going on here. There's some things that are interesting and I think can be instructive for us. 32 verse 1. "Now when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, 'Rise up and make us gods that shall go before us. As for Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him.' Aaron then said to them, 'Remove the golden earrings in the ears of your wives and daughters and bring them to me.' So all the people removed the golden earrings in their ears and brought them to Aaron. He received them from their hands, and he fashioned them with an engraving tool and made a molten calf. Then he said, 'These are your gods, O Israel, that brought you up out of the land of Egypt.' So when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. Aaron then made a proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord.' Thus he rose early the next day and offered whole burnt offerings and peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play." You will recognize there in verse 6 where the quote comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 10. It says, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. But the Lord said to Moses, and this is now happening up in the mountain, go quickly, get down from here, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt are transgressing the law. They turned aside quickly from the way I commanded them. They made themselves a calf and are worshiping and are sacrificing to it, and are saying, these are your gods, O Israel, that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Now therefore, let me be, that I may burn in my wrath against them and consume them. Then I will make of you a great nation. But Moses prayed before the Lord God and said, why, O Lord, does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak and say, he brought them out with evil intent to kill them in the mountains and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce wrath and be merciful to the wickedness of your people. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, your servants, to whom you swore by yourself and said to them, I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of heaven for multitude, and all this land I spoke about to give their seed, and they shall inherit unto the ages. So the Lord granted mercy for the harm he said he would do to his people. Then Moses turned and went down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand. They were stone tablets written on both sides, on one side and on the other. Now the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. When Joshua therefore heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. But Moses said, it is not the noise of those that begin the battle, nor of those that begin the cry of defeat, but the noise of those that begin the banquet of wine that I hear. So it was, as soon as he came near the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing. Thus Moses became very angry, and he cast the 2 tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. Then he took the calf that they made, burned it in the fire, and ground it to powder. And he scattered it on the water and made the children of Israel drink it. Moses then spoke to Aaron, what did this people do to you, that you brought so great a sin upon them? Aaron replied, do not be angry, my lord. You know how impulsive this people is. For they said to me, make us gods that shall go before us. As for this man Moses, who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. So I said to them, whoever has any gold, let him remove it. Thus they gave it to me, and I cast it into the fire, and this calf came out. Now when Moses saw the people were scattered, for Aaron scattered them, making them a prey to their enemies, Moses then stood in the entrance of the camp and said, whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me. So all the sons of Levi gathered themselves to him. He said to them, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let every man put his sword on his side and go in and out from the entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. So the sons of Levi did as Moses said to them, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. Then Moses said, you filled your hands to the Lord today, each one of you, his son or brother, that blessing be given you. Now it came to pass on the next day that Moses said to the people, you committed a great sin, so now I will go up to God to make atonement for your sin. Then Moses prayed to the Lord and said, I pray, O Lord, these people have committed a great sin and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, forgive it. But if not, blot me out of your book you have written. Then the Lord said to Moses, whoever sins against me, I will blot him out of my book. Now therefore go down and lead the people to the place which I spoke to you. Behold, my angel shall go before your face. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will strike them for their sin. So the Lord struck the people for making the calf which Aaron made. All right, so there'd be quite a number of things that could be looked at here. We're going to look specifically at the idolatry, which 1 Corinthians is talking about. There would be other themes to bring out of here as well. We can see Moses' intercession for the people and how he stood between God and man. In that, I think there's also a parallel to Jesus, and but those will all be topics for a different time. However, 1 Corinthians 10 said, don't commit idolatry, as some of them did, because, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. All right, so just looking at the story here, there's a few questions that are probably more than obvious to anyone looking at this. First of all, how did these people think that a calf led them out of Egypt? Like, seriously? So I'd like to look at that question a little bit. What really is idolatry? Secondly, who was responsible for this? Was it Aaron or was it the people? And then thirdly, why was Aaron not held to account for what happened? It appears like he pretty much wasn't. And then fourthly, I'd also like to make some practical applications to us. I don't really have anything prepared on that, but maybe we can think about that together. So the first point here is, how did they think that a calf led them out of Egypt? That's pretty weird. So have you ever wondered more generally, like how it is that pagans think that their idols that they have on their shelf can help them? And this is not just ancient phenomena, but it happens today, particularly in the Far East. There's the Hindu population and other populations, different tribal groups, will have these idols that they keep in their house. They might even have like an idol room. They just have shelves of idols. And you got to ask the question, like, do they seriously think that these are gods to be worshipped? And they probably know where they come from. They buy them at the store, and they're coming from factories that are mass producing these things. Like, how is it that this thing becomes a god that they actually, give any credibility to? So I think we've got to ask the question, whether it's ancient or whether it's modern today. Ancient as in this golden calf, or modern today, such as the Hindus. Is it accurate, in fact, that these people are believing that their idols are beings worthy of worship? So these idol worshippers, they use materials, they're objects, they're matter that is made out of wood, or maybe it's gold or silver, but it's made out of some physical substance, and they worship this thing as a representation, as a physical representation of their god. And so it's because of what the object is meant to represent is why they worship it. So if this particular god, some of them are this big and some are life size, if this particular god is something that is representative of health and vitality, or maybe it's representative of the sun, or something like that, they worship that because of what it represents. And so they will, really, pay it respect and maybe kneel down before it and like pray to it and so on. But I think that what happens is that when people do that, the devil notices that. And then the devil, sometimes I think these objects become like attached to by demons. Demons will attach themselves to these objects. And so that's why these people feel a power. They want to keep this thing with them. And so what started out as being just an object, because of their worship, because of their allegiance to it, the devil takes advantage of that, of the darkness and the ignorance of them, and then attaches himself or a demon to it. And now it actually does have some kind of a power. So they keep it with them. It travels with them. When they move, they take it along. When it goes missing, they're distraught, because in fact this thing was something that became kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The object became a god. So I think it's interesting that in this particular case, these people knew where this god came from. They donated the gold for it. Like Aaron said, give me the gold earrings from you folks. And so they did, and then he makes a calf. So it's not like they said, whoa, look, here's an ancient god, idol, that has some power. Instead, they knew where it came from. It came from they themselves, who had donated these trinkets and whatever, earrings, for the manufacturing of this item. And then Aaron said, this is the God that brought you across the Red Sea, and delivered you from Egypt. But the fact is that they were delivered from Egypt and brought across the Red Sea prior to the making of this idol, right? So I think what's happening here is that they knew that this idol itself didn't bring them across the Red Sea. This idol is actually the combination of all their earrings put together. So I think what's happening is that they are worshiping it. They're placing a significance upon it, and that's how I think that I think that's how idolatry works. People, in large part, realize, yes, these things are wood, but don't tell me that, because that's like demeaning to it, because we want to believe there's something supernatural about it. Like I said, I think that often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because demons will attach themselves to it. So in any case, it is idolatry, and God hates it. So that's how I think we can answer, how did they think a calf led them out of Egypt? I think they wanted some kind of a physical representation to worship, and that's what they did. So who was responsible for this? Well, that's an interesting question, and one I'd like to spend some time on. Verse 1 is very interesting. It says, when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, rise up and make us gods that shall go before us. You notice that it says they rose up against Aaron. So I think that would hint already that Aaron wasn't excited about this. This wasn't Aaron's idea. He didn't say to the people, you know what, where's Moses? Let's do this. The people came against him. I think the reason it says they came against him is because he was not, interested in this. So it was the people's idea. They were gathering against him. Secondly, there's many places throughout the whole chapter here. In verse 7, I think it's the first one, where the Lord told Moses that your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt, are transgressing the law. So it's talking about people, not Aaron specifically. The same thing you will find in verse 8 and 9 and 11 and 12 and 20 and 21 and 23 and 24 and 30 and 31 and 34 and 35. All these times, all those verses, there's either Moses speaking or God speaking or Aaron speaking about the people doing this. So I think looking at that, we're not going to look at all those verses, but it's undeniable that the people were responsible. But then that raises the obvious question, well then what's up with Aaron? Like, didn't he play along with this? Didn't he make this thing? Didn't he ask for their earrings and so on? So just a few things to kind of set the stage and see if we can construct what's happening here. I think there needs to be a reasonable answer to this, and I don't think we can stop by saying it was the people, because Aaron is a central part of this. So a few things. So the one accusation that the people had is that, look, we don't know what happened to Moses. He's gone. He went up in the mountain. It's been a while. In fact, it was over a month. He said he's going to go and I'll be back, but he didn't say when he'll be back. Like, if your friend did that and doesn't come back in 2 or 3 days, whatever, okay, a week, 3 weeks, like this is 6 weeks. It's more than that, or it's about almost 6 weeks. So I think that whatever impatience they had was probably something that Aaron felt too. Like, he didn't know where his brother is either. And so he probably thought, you know what, he probably died. Like, I don't think Aaron had any ideas that God is, I think that he knew that somebody could die in the presence of God. And the fact is, Moses has been gone for a long time, and every passing day, Moses' brother, Aaron, is kind of becoming like the de facto leader. Like, he didn't want to be the leader. He wasn't the leader. But now the people are actually coming to him as if he is the leader. So it's not a position that he chose. It was rather like he kind of became the leader without trying. And he wasn't counting on this, but here comes the people. The people isn't 5 or 10 people. We got a crowd here of over 1 million people, and I don't know how many were putting pressure on him, but I think it's probably pretty pretty substantial. So we got a huge crowd of people that are coming up against Aaron and saying, "Where is Moses? Come on, let's do something here. We need a calf to worship." And so anyway, what's he supposed to do? Well, Moses is gone. Before, if that had happened, he'd say, "Moses, these are your people. Do something." But he can't do that now. So none of this in any way justifies Aaron. Okay, I'm not pretending that Aaron is off the hook for this, but I think that Aaron may have come up with a plan. So I'm putting some pieces together. I'm trying to understand if this is true. I could be wrong about this. I would welcome your input if this is not right. But I think that Aaron, from the offset here, he was opposed to this. People came against him with this proposition. And I think he said, "You know what? We got 1 million people against me. I myself don't know where Moses is. I don't know if he's coming back. But I'm going to show these people that idolatry is not the way forward. I'm going to show them how stupid this is." And so I think that he was going to prepare some kind of object lesson. I think that was a mistake. I don't think he should have done that. But I think that's what was happening here. So he's going to show them how foolish this is. You know what I'm going to do? I think Aaron is thinking, he's like, "I'm going to create an idol in their presence that they know where it comes from, and we'll tell them this thing is what led them out." Like, do you realize how ridiculous this is? Kind of thing, And so he makes the proposition, "You give me your earrings." He didn't say that I have a stash of sacred gold somewhere. He's like, "You give me your earrings, and we're going to make this thing, and then we'll say that this is the God that brought you out of Egypt." It's not even a God that will do something for them. He's going to make the more preposterous claim that this is a God that already did something for them in bringing them out of Egypt and across the Red Sea. Like, nobody is going to fall for this. And so he's going to, I think he's creating an object lesson. I don't know, I could be wrong, but if this is wrong, tell me what's a better idea. So anyway, he thinks that in the end, the people are going to say, "This isn't legit, like this is not okay." And then he's going to be like, "I told you so. Of course this is not okay." But anyway, that's not what happened. What happened is he started by doing this object lesson that I think was a mistake. You shouldn't play along with this. And the people got on board, and they thought this is legit. And they start to worship it. So now he has a bigger problem. He started something that he didn't know what to do with, and now he's in big trouble. The people are starting to worship it, and so he wants to change course. So Aaron sees the people are worshiping this thing. Are you kidding me? So he says, "You know what we're going to do? He makes a proclamation. Tomorrow, we're going to have a feast to the Lord." And I think he's trying to change the course of what's happening. So he rises up early in the morning, and he offers whole burnt offerings and peace offerings. These are not pagan sacrifices. These are sacrifices that God would be well pleased with. He's like, "We got to change this. This is out of control. I'm not okay with this." So he announces that he's going to offer a feast to the Lord. But I think it was already too late. And verse 6 ends by saying that the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. They're like, "Yes, let's have a party." But their God is not the God that Aaron wants to worship. So it's interesting that when Moses eventually came down from the mountain, that he saw, this is in verse 25, he saw that the people were scattered, for Aaron scattered them, making them a prey to their enemies. So I think what's happening is that Aaron became desperate. He's like, "This is out of control." He's like, it'd be preferable for these people to become a prey to the enemies than for them to fall into idolatry. Because I think he had a heart after God. I think he made a mistake, but I think he had a heart after God, and he doesn't want them given to idolatry, so he would rather have them be scattered by the enemies than to be given to idolatry. And so that's why he scattered them, making them a prey to their enemies. Whatever that means, he was somehow making them vulnerable, that an opposing enemy could overtake them and end this whole thing. Moses is gone. Aaron doesn't know how to lead them on. And so this is what he's going to do. So in the middle of this, Moses appears. The people are worshiping the God, the one that he created there, and his sacrifice to the Lord and his intention of having a feast to the Lord turned into a worship of this demon, essentially, I think it becomes. And so now Moses appears, and there's probably no time that Aaron was more relieved to see Moses and also more filled with dread and humiliated at what's happening. So his oversight during this time ended in a disaster, and so Aaron has to explain this somehow to Moses. So Aaron says to Moses that, I told them, whoever has gold, let them remove it. They gave it to me, I threw it into the fire, and this calf comes out. So every time that we read this, we're like, okay, Aaron, you're like downplaying your part in this. Like, you crafted this thing, right? You crafted this, you made this, this is entirely your thing, and you're just trying to make it sound funny or somehow be dismissive of that. But I don't think that's what's happening. I think that instead, Aaron is saying to Moses that this thing got out of control. Like, I only started to play along with this a little bit, and the next thing we know, we got a calf here. I think that's what he's trying to say. Like, it's like truly a slippery slope that we started going down, and I'm not trying to be dismissive here, but this thing really got out of control quickly. Like, within 24 hours, we went from them demanding this calf to now this calf appears. You know, so again, I could be wrong about what I'm presenting here, but this is what I think is happening. Like, basically, there's an unstoppable momentum that had started here, and it ends with this calf. So if there's a different way to understand this, I would more than welcome that. But as I see this, this is a warning against compromise. If you begin to compromise, you have no idea how quickly things are going to get out of control. If you think that, you know what, I'm under pressure here, I'll give it this much because that'll alleviate some pressure. What he should have done is that I'm not going along with this at all. I don't know where Moses is, but I'm not going to help you make a calf. You know what I mean? It's like, I think what happened is he started going down a slippery slope, and he slipped down the slope. And it was an error. It was Aaron's fault, but I think he had a heart after God, but he made a serious mistake. And so that's how he got into this situation. So why was Aaron not held accountable for this? Well, if what I presented is true, that he was not really behind this and he played along and got out of control, then I think there's probably right there a lot of responsibility that comes off of him for that. I think that is justified by the times that God said, look what the people did. And, I think it kind of illustrates that God understood that Aaron was not railroading this thing at all, or Aaron wasn't even leading the people into this. He was going along with it and facilitating some things, but so anyway, I think he would be largely in the clear. Aaron's life, maybe it could be argued that he did suffer for it. His life was not a peaceful journey. 2 of his sons were killed a little bit later on with their own transgressions. So, there might have been some reaping there. I don't know. It's interesting, though, that when Moses came there and he says, who is on the Lord's side? Who was it that came forward? It was the tribe of Levi. And why was it the tribe of Levi? Why was it that one tribe, Levi, comes forward and says, we're on the Lord's side? It's possible. Just remember, Aaron is a Levite, okay? Aaron might have been the one leading his tribe into that. Aaron might have been the one saying, he might have been like the first one saying, I'm on the Lord's side. Like I want to be here answering this call. And then, of course, those that responded to Moses were ultimately designated as the leaders of the worship of Israel, which, of course, included Aaron. Aaron had been picked out before that as being the worship leader for Israel. So if we second guess this tolerance that it seems like maybe God had towards Aaron, then suppose that God had not done that. Suppose God had not been tolerant towards Aaron's error. Then what would happen? Well, then perhaps Aaron would have been destroyed, or paid for his sin by death or something like that. But he had already been promised by God that he's going to lead the people. So it's like either we say God wasn't fair in the case of giving some tolerance here, or we got to say that God didn't foresee this coming, and the whole thing fell apart. I don't know, but I think that ultimately, if we understand the picture of what was happening here, it kind of takes that responsibility off of him. Okay, so to be maybe a little bit more interactive here and have some participation, I'd like to think about what I mentioned at the beginning, how the people were worshiping this gold idol in some respect to the true God. Like they thought they're going to worship God, and they're here worshiping this idol in this confusion. So I think it's possible that they were like worshiping the idol unto the Lord. You know what I mean? Like this idol is the representation of the true God that brought them out of Egypt in their twisted thinking. So what I'd like to think about is, what are the ways in which we might have idols? So Paul says, don't get involved in idolatry as these people did. Did he think that the risk is that they're going to be putting idols on their shelves? Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe he wants them to be reminded that there's ways that we can worship the Lord with idols in our lives. And so that's what I'd like to think about here a little bit. Are there idols that we might have in our lives whereby we worship the Lord? Are there things in which we, perhaps with good intention or otherwise, are worshiping the Lord through some objects or whatever? Any thoughts about that? Yeah, those are excellent examples. I never bought a prayer mat. I actually got one in the mail for free from some place that was trying to get money. And here's a prayer mat as a gift, like it's a piece of paper, But people, pray on this thing, and if there's some fulfillment, or some answer to their prayer, they, say, wow, there's, something special here. I think one thing that I suggest comes a lot closer home that we should think about is even our places of worship. You've probably all heard people saying that we gather together within these sacred walls, referring to their church building, is I think a serious thing. Like, we shouldn't be pretending that these walls are sacred. That's an error, and I think a risk of idolatry. These are just objects. We're to only have one God that we worship. Darwin mentioned Bibles, and I know questions come up. What do you do with an old Bible that's needs to be replaced? And people don't want to be disrespectful to it, but essentially they've almost come to worship the book. Yeah, I think that's again a mistake where people place too much respect upon the article instead of what the article is pointing to. Is there are other things like that. I think these are places where these instructions come a lot closer home, and I don't think that any of us have shelves of idols or anything like that. But I think that we do have the risk of potentially valuing things on earth as sacred when in fact the Lord doesn't uh, hold any respect to that.